Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 246. Chapter 246. The Russian troops were passing through Moscow from 2 o'clock at night till 2 in the afternoon, and bore away with them the wounded and the last inhabitants who were leaving. The greatest crush during the movement of the troops took place at the Stone, Moskva, and Yauza bridges. While the troops, dividing into two parts when passing around the Kremlin, were thronging the Moskva and the Stone bridges, a great many soldiers, taking advantage of the stoppage and congestion, turned back from the bridges and slipped stealthily and silently past the church of Vasily the Beatified and under the Borovitsky gate, back up the hill to the Red Square, where some instinct told them they could easily take things not belonging to them. Crowds of the kind seen at cheap sales filled all the passages and alleys of the bazaar. But there were no dealers with voices of ingratiating affability inviting customers to enter. There were no hawkers, nor the usual motley crowd of female purchasers, but only soldiers, in uniforms and overcoats, though without muskets, entering the bazaar empty-handed and silently making their way through its passages with bundles. Tradesmen and their assistants, of whom there were but few, moved about among the soldiers quite bewildered. They unlocked their shops and locked them up again, and themselves carried goods away with the help of their assistants. On the square in front of the bazaar were drummers beating the muster call. But the roll of their drums did not make the looting soldiers run in the direction of the drum as formerly, but made them, on the contrary, run farther away. Among the soldiers in the shops and passages, some men were to be seen in grey coats, with closely shaven heads. Two officers, one with a scarf over his uniform and mounted on a lean, dark gray horse, the other in an overcoat and on foot, stood at the corner of Vinyika Street talking. A third officer galloped up to them. "The general orders them all to be driven out at once, without fail. This is outrageous. Half the men have dispersed." "Where are you off to? Where?" he shouted to 3 infantrymen without muskets who, holding up the skirts of their overcoats, were slipping past him into the bazaar passage. "Stop, you rascals!" "But how are you going to stop them?" replied another officer. "There's no getting them together. The army should push on before the rest bolt, that's all." "How can one push on? They're stuck here, wedged on the bridge, and don't move. Shouldn't we put a cordon round to prevent the rest from running away?" "Come, go in there and drive them out," shouted the senior officer. The officer in the scarf dismounted, called up a drummer, and went with him into the arcade. Some soldiers started running away in a group. A shopkeeper with red pimples on his cheeks near the nose and a calm, persistent, calculating expression on his plump face hurriedly and ostentatiously approached the officer, swinging his arms. "Your Honor," said he, "be so good as to protect us. We won't grudge trifles. You are welcome to anything. We shall be delighted. Pray, I'll fetch a piece of cloth at once for such an honorable gentleman, or even 2 pieces with pleasure. For how we feel about it, but what's all this? Sheer robbery. If you please, could not guards be placed if only to let us close the shop?" Several shopkeepers crowded around the officer. "Ah, what twaddle," said one of them, a thin, stern-looking man. "When one's head is gone, one doesn't weep for one's hair. Take what you like, if anything." And flourishing his arms energetically, he turned sideways to the officer. "It's all very well for you, Ivan Sidorich, to talk," said the first tradesman angrily. "Please step aside, Your Honor." "Talk indeed," cried the thin one. In my 3 shops, here I have 100,000 rubles worth of goods. Can they be saved when the army is gone? Ah, what people! Against God's might our hands can't fight. Come inside, your honor, repeated the tradesman, bowing. The officer stood perplexed, and his face showed indecision. It's not my business, he exclaimed, and strode on quickly down one of the passages. From one open shop came the sound of blows and vituperation, and just as the officer came up to it, a man in a gray coat with a shaven head was flung out violently. This man, bent double, rushed past the tradesman and the officer. The officer pounced on the soldiers who were in the shops, but at that moment fearful screams reached them from the huge crowd on the Moskva bridge, and the officer ran out into the square. What is it? What is it? He asked. But his comrade was already galloping off past Vasily the Beatified and the direction from which the screams came. The officer mounted his horse and rode after him. When he reached the bridge, he saw 2 unlimbered guns, the infantry crossing the bridge, several overturned carts, and frightened and laughing faces among the troops. Beside a cannon, a cart was standing, to which 2 horses were harnessed. 4 borzois with collars were pressing close to the wheels. The cart was loaded high, and at the very top, beside a child's chair with its legs in the air, sat a peasant woman uttering piercing and desperate shrieks. He was told by his fellow officers that the screams of the crowd and the shrieks of the woman were due to the fact that General Ermolov, coming up to the crowd and learning that soldiers were dispersing among the shops while crowds of civilians blocked the bridge, had ordered 2 guns to be unlimbered and made a show of firing at the bridge. The crowd, crushing one another, upsetting carts, and shouting and squeezing desperately, had cleared off the bridge, and the troops were now moving forward. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 246. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, Day 246. The Common Lot of Mortals. While life is full of misery and suffering, it is also blessedly short. That's my own version of bright-side thinking. It's not a sentiment I frequently share with others. Society is important, and nobody wants to socialize with someone who combines the dour cynicism of Benjamin the Donkey with the misanthropic grumpiness of Oscar the Grouch. Although that guy does sound pretty awesome. Anyway, if you're one of those unfortunate souls afflicted with the empathy-borg bun of prolonged exposure to reading literary fiction, then you probably can't come away from today's chapter with anything other than a similarly lugubrious feeling. Just look at the sorry lot of the Muscovites. They evacuate their beloved city. Man's irrepressibly rapacious nature surfaces as the troops double back, not to help others escape, but rather to loot the unguarded marketplace. Peasant women shriek desperate, piercing howls. A general fires on a bridge packed full of civilians to get things moving again. A crushing, screeching stampede ensues. The human condition in one chapter. Daily meditation. No one denies that it is sad, but it is the common lot of mortals. You were born to lose others, to be lost, to hope, to fear, to destroy your own peace and that of others, to fear, and yet to long for death, and worst of all, never to know what your real position is. Seneca, Of Consolation to Marcia. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 246 and my reflection too. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation to PayPal. The links to all of that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 247. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.